Welcome to episode 66 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast, where we talk all things flying and aviation in midlife, later life, early life, any life. My name's Ben. I am a pilot that has a commercial rating, but do not fly professionally yet. I fly a Cessna 182 in the Atlanta metropolitan area and places beyond. Tonight, we have, as always, our co-host Brian, a private pilot. Nashville is his home of the Bachelorette Super Charlie. He flies a Cherokee 180 named Lucy. Hey, Brian.
Hey, buddy. Yeah, I flew a Cherokee named Lucy a lot, even today. And by the way, you forgot to refer to your plane as the Beast.
The Beast. I did. Well, the Beast is sick right now. It's not sick. It's going in for its checkup. So,
is it a he or a she?
We're going to go with a she.
Okay.
She Beast sounds better to me.
I like it.
Also tonight, we have our friend from the left coast, sport pilot extraordinaire, coming to us from Portlandia, flying a flight design CTLS we call the Egg. Hey, Ted.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
Speaking of the plane being in for service, you're titled as Old Man Ben. What's that about?
As my father loves to remind me on a regular basis, getting old is not for the faint of heart. I was doing my good deed for the day on Saturday, getting an old 1990s style TV, which means not a flat screen. And Evan and I, and actually Terry was helping, we're getting in the back of my truck to take it to a electronics recycling event. And threw my back out.
Oh.
So I have been walking around, and my wife calls it the old man shuffle. And it's, I really look like I'm 80 years old.
Oh, man.
So that's why I gave my title tonight as Old Man Ben, because that's how I feel right now.
And then at the end of the day, you take this giant CRT 500-pound television to this electronics recycling event, and they probably just look at you and go, yeah, we don't. This is just like a cathode ray tube about to explode. Can you just take that back and just bury it in your yard?
Yeah. No, fortunately, that didn't happen. But and it was all precipitated by an event that happened in Vancouver. I was there last week, as everybody knows. We did this really cool bike tour around Stanley Park. So that's Vancouver's version of Central Park, and it's actually bigger than Central Park, and it's really neat. It is literally a tropical rainforest in the middle of this metropolitan city, and it was really cool. So we're riding along. It's a brisk 40 degrees outside, which for us Southerners that's kind of cold, especially on a bike. So we're cruising along, and I see Terry's in front of me, and she slows down a little bit, and I just looked up and overreacted and hit the left brake and not the right brake, and I went right over the top of the handlebars. I just wish it was on video, because I was told it was probably one of the most graceful over the handlebar falls this person had ever seen. But what I didn't like about it was they were treating me like I was 90 years old and I'd just fallen down. And it really wasn't that bad. I really had the wind knocked out of me. I couldn't breathe. And I'm trying to get back up on the bike like I'm young, I'm spry, let's go. But I couldn't breathe. And a friend of ours was like, you need to stop. You need to take a beat. You need to relax. So yeah, that started the body falling apart for the weekend. So
God, that brings back so many memories. That prideful feeling of I've got the wind knocked out of me. I actually cannot breathe right now, but I'm going to pretend in a hyper vigilant, responsive way that I'm going to demonstrate that I'm fine when really I am not at all. Like that brings back some memories. A lot of soccer games, a lot of things.
Yeah. So anyway, I am better than I was yesterday, and then better than the 2 days ago. So I'm
glad you're doing all right, man.
We're on the heel. The Beast is an annual, so I couldn't do any flying anyway. I was supposed to do an angel flight on Sunday, and I had to call and cancel it because I couldn't barely walk. I couldn't make it to the airport.
You needed your own angel flight.
I needed my own angel flight. That's exactly right. Anyway, that's been my adventure. I know, Brian, you've had a pretty cool flight here over the last 48 hours.
Yeah. I did a quick adventure. I knew that there was just a little bit of a hole in my schedule to where, just as the holes of the Swiss cheese can line up for terrible things to happen, there's also the holes of the good things that can happen, I suppose, Swiss cheese, where you look at your schedule, you check the airplane, you start looking at the weather, and you realize, wow, if I leave on Sunday, I can get to the Gulf in a really good amount of time with about a 35 knot tailwind. And if forecasts hold up, when I come back on Tuesday, I will have a tailwind coming back. And so I just looked at everything and I thought, you know what? This is what it's all about. So yeah, I took off and I flew to Mobile, Alabama for a kind of...
That's Mobile.
Mobile. By the way, like I know this and I said that except for just one time on the radio with one of the approach controllers, or I think my first call up, because I was reading it while I was saying it or something. I said mobile or something like that. And I felt like such a fool. But anyway, it was great. I got down there in a little bit under 3 hours in my hyperspeed Cherokee 180. And it's just nice. Mobile International is a great airport. I cannot say enough about the FBO. It is a signature FBO, but I'm telling you, man, they couldn't have treated me any better. It was amazing. One of the things that happens if you're going to go down there and stay for a couple of days, if you're in and around Mobile, you're going to have some trouble with Ubers. The place where I was staying was only about 4 or 5 miles from the hotel, but to get an Uber, especially in the afternoon, they would just all of a sudden be $60 to go 4 miles or whatever. And there was maybe 1.7 drivers for the whole area. I'm not sure what's going on. Anyway, the FBO was aware of this, and 2 different times, line guys took a crew car and drove me to where I needed to go and went back. And so they saved me not only a lot of headaches, but a lot of dough. And so even though their fuel's on the more pricey side, totally worth it. Highly recommend. Those people were great. I remember the name. Let's see. Emily was great. Houston, several people I dealt with there. I've really just had an incredible experience. So to base out of there, 10,000 foot runway. So it was enough to get the Cherokee down and,
barely.
Yeah. And it's a great, I think it's runway 14. You just launch out over the bay, and that part of it was a little unnerving. I think I had really in my mind figured out all these ways to mitigate overflying water for too long. The bay is not huge, but it's definitely not small. And when you get launched out over that, it's you're aware of it.
Right.
But you're on flight following. I mean, you have to be there because it's so busy. There's so many things going on at once. And
is that a Charlie? The airport?
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah. I guess I should remember that. But yeah, I believe it is. And you get an assigned heading, and it's sending you out just further and further. And if they're busy and they're chattering with somebody else, and you're just cruising along at 090 assigned heading, you're almost to Fairhope, Alabama.
I was going to say, you think you're halfway to Cuba, the way it feels, how far out of the water you are.
Yeah. And then, you start looking for that turn, waiting for that turn. But, and without getting into all the recap of the whole experience, generally it was amazing. The highlights and things that I thought were interesting were, one, yesterday when I was down there, I just decided to go fly around. I took off out of Mobile International, went north, and I just wanted to go land at different weird airports around there and just kind of see the sights and check out different places. First place I decided, and meanwhile I'm on flight following, and it's all very tightly packed areas. So everything's happening very fast in terms of the conversations and the traffic and all of that. And usually I do flight following all the time, but if it's a 12-mile trip, I'm probably not going to do it. Depending in this environment, you do it. I don't care if it's 2 miles. You're going to want to be on a flight following in this environment. So here I am on flight following, and I'm saying, "Hey, I'm going to go to Bay Minette." I get over to Bay Minette, and I can't believe what I'm seeing. There's so many people in the pattern that you know how you keep zooming in for flight, and it keeps revealing new.
More and more.
It was just like a sort of a. You remember that video game Tempest?
Yes.
Right, with the sort of vortex of lines, 3D kind of lines. That's what every airport looked like. There were 11 planes in the pattern at every airport there. So I kept amending my destination to okay, well, I'm going to go to Fairhope. I go over to Fairhope. It's the same thing. So finally I ended up just following the coast, going around the bay. And I'm going to Dauphin Island, which is really one of my main reasons for being down there. I always wanted to land at Dauphin Island. That runway is kind of like a carrier landing. But I want to stay pretty close to the shore, as I don't want to just straight across the bay to get to Dauphin Island. So I'm coming around to the sort of south and over to the east, and then approach is like, how much further west are you going to go? Because I'm going to have to terminate you, So I had to, turn a little bit more. I had to do things that I didn't. If I was just flying VFR, not flight following, I would have just hugged the shore all the way, taking the long way around, and I'm not in a hurry. But in that environment, that was the surprise element for me, was being forced to kind of do some things that you kind of had to get with. So I always asked for more altitude than I wanted and took what I could get and all of that, just to give myself as much room as possible. But anyway, landing at Dauphin Island, man, that is just, it was probably about like a 13 knot direct crosswind.
Ooh.
And when the runway is the only thing, and then it's just water all around, it definitely wakes up your rudder usage for sure. And so coming in, I just couldn't believe it. It's just one of those things where it seems completely surreal. The physics of everything around you seem strange. It really felt like you're landing on a carrier. Not that I know anything about that. So anyway, came in, had a very good approach and landing, and felt very good about it, and got out, and I was the only human around. It was just a really satisfying thing. And then I just walked 20 minutes into town and got a po' boy and walked to the beach. And anyway, I highly recommend Dauphin Island to anybody. Seems like a beautiful place to live. I didn't realize so many people just how it's just a neighborhood basically.
It's amazing how many of our great landings are done when there's nobody around to see them.
Nobody. Yeah, and I thought somebody would just come out and congratulate me from around the back of the little shed that's there or something, but nope, didn't happen. I did meet some on the way when I came back. There was another plane there, and it was a couple of young pilots from. Guess where all the pilots are from? Where do you think the pilots are from?
I'm going to guess somewhere on the Florida Panhandle or Alabama.
Wisconsin. All pilots are from Wisconsin.
Of course.
Right? It seems this way. But anyway, it was a couple young guys. They're both CFIs. They could just take their school plane or their club plane or whatever it was. And as long as they just pay for fuel, they can kind of go miles it out. And so that's what they were doing. And it was great because it was a direct crosswind. They were coming in and landing like both ways and having a good old time. But anyway, it was neat to meet some, had some good conversations with those guys, and that's what it's all about. So anyway, I did go over to Trent Lott International in what is the Pascagoula, Mississippi. Stopped over in Pascagoula. Ted, you got any Pascagoula landings?
I was just trying to think about how I'd say that on the radio and butcher it.
Well, that's why you say Trent Lott. So
yeah, exactly.
So yeah. Anyway, did a landing over there and went back. Anyway, I just did a lot of flying around the area. It was so beautiful. The weather was perfect. My flight back today was 3 hours tailwind. Got out at John Toon for a minute, then got back in, then took the plane back to Bowling Green. So I got about almost 4 hours of flying in today, on the back of a bunch of other flying the last couple of days. So I am talked out and flown out. So anyway, that's the update from this part of the
Ted, you posted a video not that long ago of going over to somewhere on the coast. Again, the views in your videos are your boring videos, might I add.
Yeah, it's my boring video. Yeah.
Were amazing. Where was that again?
That was Gold Beach, Oregon, which is almost as far south as you can go on the Oregon coast.
Okay.
And it's so far that I don't even think of it as being somewhere you can get to by car because it's so hard to get there. So, yeah, I've been kind of kicking that video around for a little while, and so it's nice to get it out.
That's a good one. For those in the chat or for our audio loss audience, Fly Sport, check him out on YouTube.
By the way, Captain Todd here is saying he got checked out in his first Piper Archer at Trent Lott International in Pascagoula. And he said we did a lot of our air work over the barrier islands west of Dauphin. So that was one of the choices I made that I kind of elected to not make, but you can kind of go down the string of barrier islands in the same way. It's kind of like the Outer Banks. And I think it ends at Horn Island, I think is what it's called. But anyway, that's really cool, Captain Todd. It's beautiful down there. I would be... there's not a lot of good places to go if you have a problem, but it's great when it's good.
It's beautiful. So I have two quick stories. One of them I'm not proud of, and the other one I'm very proud of. We had to fly WestJet going up to Vancouver. And this is fresh off mine and Lord Alpha Juliet's trip to the 737 simulator. And that's all that WestJet flies is 737-800s, which was the exact model that we flew in the simulator. And I was walking down the jetway. I was telling myself, don't say anything about your sim time. Don't say anything about your sim time. And I walked by both pilots, thank goodness, were in the cockpit, but the lead flight attendant was greeting. And I said, I'm in 9F if you need somebody to land the plane. I just had 3 landings in the simulator. And I winked at him, and he's like, he totally rolled his eyes, as well he should have. It's exactly what he should have done. It just came out. I couldn't stop it. It's just one of those things. Those words were in my throat, and they had to come out. And then I redeemed myself, and I know we'll get moving on here in a second. So we did a seaplane tour in Vancouver, and this was in a Otter. And the pilot said, does anybody want to sit in the front seat? And of course, I was the very first to bring my hand up. And nobody else wanted to, thankfully. So I get sat and I'm putting the seatbelt on, and he started to tell me how to put the seatbelt on. And I said, I have a 182. And he just kind of smiled at me and just kind of nodded his head. And it was cool from that point on. We talked everything. It was awesome. He was showing me all these different things.
Ben, I thought you were going to say you tell the guy I have a 182, and then he looks at you and goes, okay, well, here's how you clasp it.
No, it wasn't that. No, it was kind of my way to passively aggressively say, I kind of know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And he took it that way. It was a really cool exchange. And he told the controller, which by the way, seaplanes, they have taxiways too, believe it or not. I didn't know that. They said, yeah, got a prop. They were trying to contact him, and he and I were talking, and he said, yeah, I got a fellow prop head in the right seat with me. So it was kind of a
nice,
proud moment. So let's hit some housekeeping items. As our live chat, who is very active tonight, knows, we broadcast live on YouTube Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, youtube.com/@midlifepilot. We love our active chat community and would love for you to join us. Audio podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify. I listen to it on Overcast. I don't listen to our podcast, but I listen to all podcasts on Overcast. But you can get our podcast on wherever you get your audio listening things. I'm losing
We're
my
on
word.
Audible now, actually. Did you know that?
Yeah. No, I did not know that.
Yeah, Audible. So there's a million places. It's all on our website.
Lastly, we love getting feedback and your suggestions. You can email us at midlifepilotpodcast@gmail.com. You can find all these links on our website at midlifepilotpodcast.com, including our Patreon links. Ted, do you want to tell us who our new Patreons for the week are? Oh, he's got you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I blew up over here. Yeah, so we've got 2 new Patreon supporters this week. I want to say thanks to them. And that's Robert K. and Andrew H. So really appreciate it when people sign up, and it means a lot to us.
Yeah. Awesome.
We do appreciate it. It really does mean a lot. We did get some feedback last week. Brian, do you want to take on that?
Sure, yeah. So let me get this thing where I can actually read it and talk into a microphone at the same time. Okay. So, and this is, and just so everybody knows, when you do send in feedback, you have the right to remain anonymous. We will gladly honor anonymity requests. So in a weird way, it's kind of like if somebody says, I don't want to be mentioned, it kind of makes you a little cooler, I think, in a way. It's, but then there's like the flip side of it, right? Like the Larry David thing where, on Curb Your Enthusiasm, where somebody donates to the art gallery, or Larry David donates to the art gallery and they credit him, but then Ted Danson does also for the other part of the gallery, and it's anonymous. And then his wife is so enamored that Ted's anonymous. I was like, well, if you want to be anonymous, stop telling people that you're anonymous. Anyway, we appreciate any feedback, anonymous or not. So I'll just read it here. It's let's see, where does that start? Oh, it says, does this start where it says a listener?
Yes.
Is that what we're calling it?
Yes. Okay. Our anonymous listener.
Anonymous listener. It's a good podcast, but I thought it neglected. Wait, no, by the way, the context here is it's talking about our podcast. Okay.
Talking about our previous episode of the
Sport
podcast.
Pilot. Our Sport Pilot focused episode. It's a good podcast, but I thought it neglected the fastest growing segment of Sport Pilots, the downgrading oldster pilots. As I understand it, we represent the fastest growing segment of sport piloting. In other words, those of us smart enough to know not to take the risk of another medical. It's just a fact of life that medical issues multiply with age. I wasn't going to find out. At 71, I'm quite happy to buzz around my Leaf with an engine. And frankly, these LSAs are fun and exciting airplanes to fly. So I like that because that's an important sort of step down that we haven't, I guess we didn't acknowledge. And we've talked about, and I know there's been a lot of other conversations lately around the aviation sphere about when to hang it up, like just plain silly. Brian was talking about his dad in that video that got around a lot and was very, I think, poignant and interesting to sort of know when to hang it up. And perhaps, there's a more graduated scale in which you can do that. And so I appreciate this feedback very much. And that's a very good observation. And I think all of us are going to be looking at the end of this at some point, and there might be gradations of that option as we kind of exit the building.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all going to get to that point for sure. It's actually hard to count how many people are doing this because you are a private pilot exercising privileges of a sport pilot. So there's no certificate change or anything else. And just one of those like weird cases where we just have to know by observation that that's probably what people are doing. So it's kind of an interesting case.
Some of us might be approaching that sooner than others with my back.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I wanted to mention one thing that I didn't mention last week as well, which is everybody's favorite tomato flames. I think we're going to hear about that a little bit later, but 91205 required instruments for light sport aircraft. It actually doesn't apply because if you read the top of that, it says for standard airworthiness category aircraft. It gets really nutty from there because you dig down into the light sport regulations and it's like, well, use what's in your manual as the required equipment. They don't all have that. Now what do? Technically, you don't have a list at that point. So the reality is you go back to 91205 anyway. It's just one of those like weird rabbit holes you can go down with a DPE of this doesn't apply, but nothing else does. So let's just use it anyway. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that. It's kind of interesting.
I always think of 90125 when I hear 92105.
Yeah. Yes.
Excuse me. I was just looking, our friend, Mr. Ballard, I'm still nursing my back from all of Ben's commercial short field landings. Nathan, I'm going to tell you, send me the chiropractic bill. I'll pay it. You suffered a lot, and I appreciate your sacrifice.
I want to get this question from Josh up here, this prompt at least, where he says, curious what the benefits of step down to sport pilot versus step down to basic med are. And as a person that has gone from third class medical to basic med, I didn't have any reason for that other than I just had a pretty good sense of the threshold of flying that I would be doing for the foreseeable future and then some, versus the idea of the risk of, and just the hassle, honestly, of more, whatever it is every 2 years, constantly having to deal with all that. Whereas basic med was just sort of like I don't know, Ted, you're the kind of guy that likes to pay for software subscriptions for a year at a time. You know what I mean? It's like that's kind of what basic med is to me, but I understand that it's not like that for everybody. But I can see how, maybe that's sort of part of if we were to describe like a perfectly, like the gradient of stepping down from certificated private pilot, maybe that is sort of the first step, is to go basic med. And then after that, maybe be looking at something like sport.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it probably depends on, what conditions you have. When you start getting into heart issues, then sport might make a little more sense. So I guess it's just knowing if you're going to qualify for basic med or not. So
yeah, and I think that's what they were saying in the email too, right? Is just you'll know when it's not the time to try to go for that medical again. Yeah. So we've done a lot of talking about ways to get out of flying. But Ben, what's our topic tonight? It's about flying, isn't it?
I love our topic tonight. It's
all right.
Night flying. And we didn't really have a specific format of what we're going to talk about, but I'll tell you what I think I take into consideration. I absolutely love it. It's actually my favorite time to fly. I don't do it as often, but I absolutely love it. I feel like that I just, I think my mind kind of blocks out the risks of trying to figure out where to land when your engine goes out at night. Because I usually don't think about it until I'm already up in the air and I see how black things are when there's no street lights. But again, it is, for me, my moment is in. I love it. There's very few birds at night. I don't think I've ever seen one, even at dusk. You can spot other airplanes very, very quickly. And especially when you live in a metropolitan area, I love flying through downtown Atlanta at night. It's just, there's something that's just a little extra special for me.
Well, you live in a great place to do night flying, first of all.
Yes.
I think that for a lot of folks, I think we all live in a pretty good place for night flying. I think for a lot of folks, it can be a little bit more daunting, but there's so much we can talk about with respect to night flying, but I can just generally say, number one, we are not instructors and we don't know what we're talking about. Meanwhile, CFII, Nathan Ballard's always with us, and he's chiming in here to let us know that 30% of bird strikes are at night. Ask him how he knows. And we should definitely mention, and we'll put in the show notes, the new video that our friend Nathan Ballard just released is incredible about ways to mitigate risk of bird strikes. And so maybe we can even do something specific for that at some point, because it was just an incredible video. But basically, it's not a luck of the draw scenario, and that there are actual tools and data-driven resources to mitigate the risk of bird strikes. But you're right, Ben, less at night, which is great. Now, the type of night flying that you do, Ben, I mean, it's what? How frequently do you fly at night?
So, out of my 1,000 hours, I have about 80 hours at night, which to me is kind of a lot. It's usually done for proficiency and currency. And then there's those occasional times when I'm on a trip, either with family or for work, that I get I just get back later that night. You know, it just requires me to fly at night. I've done it quite a few times between here and Florida. You know, you got kids in school and they can't get out of school and we're already down at the beach. So I'll fly and pick them up and bring them back down. And that's usually a night flight, you know, just kind of situationally dependent for me. Yeah. But I much prefer going up for the proficiency and currency pieces because I'm staying within the area. There's 6 airports around me that I know that I could usually get to pretty easily. You know, if something were to happen. And Eric Palumbo just brought up a good point too, that I wanted to mention that I didn't. He says, I just did my night dual cross country last Saturday. It was so smooth and beautiful. You just have to accept the fact that you can't see emergency landing areas. And that's the point I wanted to make. The weather, if it's VFR, it is going to be smooth.
Well,
so for you, I mean, when do you've made several videos flying at night?
Yeah, well, you know, my first night flight I've talked about before, which was when I went up with an instructor. The first time I ever went up at night, a gust front came through that was it was gusting 40 to 45 knots out of nowhere, and you know, we live 2 miles from the airport. My poor wife is out here on the porch realizing that all of our stuff is getting just blown over on the porch and this gust front's coming out of nowhere. It's summertime. And then she realizes, oh, right. And he's up for his first night flight right now. Oh. And I've got a video up on my channel. I think it's still public, but it's like first couple of landings were great. I was like, this night flying is incredible. And then out of nowhere, and the plane is just, I mean, it was, so I basically ended up going from because everybody talks about, oh, it's going to be so calm and, you know, you're just going to love it. It ended up being one of the most chaotic and frightening and awesome kind of experiences I've ever had in a plane. Hey, man, but I wrestled them all down and I got it down and we survived. So it was a great experience. But other than that, number one, I just want to preface everything with saying, I think it's crazy that the first time you ever get in a plane solo at night is when you are no longer under the umbrella of any kind of training operation or minimums or, you know, like some sort of restrictions or things that are kind of imposed upon you by some governing entity or school or something. It blows my mind that the first time you just send it out there, you're on your own and you probably don't have a ton of experience to begin with and you just figure it out. That's
and in Canada, you have to, that's part of your IFR rating, I think, or it's not included.
It's a night rating.
Yeah, you have to get a night rating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's common in a lot of countries to require the instrument rating before night. And that isn't true in Canada, but Canada requires 10 hours of night training. 5 hours of those are night solo. So yeah, it's a lot different than what we have, or a bit different than what we have.
And I don't want to go down this road too much or make our recording here not quite as evergreen, but it's impossible for me not to sit here as a human being and not acknowledge the crash that happened right down the street from my house just a week ago. That was a night flying incident. And so it has me thinking all the time, you know, about sort of the risk versus reward. And when you think about it from the place that we're coming from, we are midlife pilots. We never have to fly. We don't have to do anything. There's no pressure here. At the same time, I know several pilots that just refuse to fly at night. And I think that that's totally a fair choice that people can make. On the flip side of that, and my counterpoint to that in any conversations that I've had with pilots that refuse to fly at night is what I say is, when you really get out there and you're flying a lot and you're traveling and you're putting yourself out there, you need to have tools in your toolkit for every scenario. And one of the things that when you really get into the deeper flight planning and scenario planning of, okay, I'm going to be 8 hours away from home and I've got these choices to make to get to these places under these conditions. I want for diversion options as much freedom of movement in my brain as possible in terms of my pilot skills and currency and proficiency. And that means not just to be able to fly at night and being current, but also, for winds or, whatever. I don't want to be in a situation where I'm like, oh, well, I don't feel comfortable in a 15 knot crosswind. But I'm in a situation here. Like I want to have all of those baseline things met as much as possible. And so with night flying, my point of view is one should do it at least enough to keep current and proficient with it. Because the other thing too is when you have passengers with you, you don't want to be in a situation where you find yourself rushing to get back before sunset, or like Ted describes in the sport pilot realm, turning into a pumpkin.
Yep.
You don't want to be in that situation where you are now in the back of your mind, and you're not going to sit there maybe and explain to your passenger friend or whoever, like, okay, well, there's currency and there's proficiency and there's these minimum requirements and there's full stop, landings, and it's a whole thing, like you're just going to be thinking, I got to get back. And anything I think that makes you rush or hasten what you're doing is going to be much more of an introduction for the potential of a Swiss cheese element than maybe even the thing that you are trying to avoid itself. So all that to be said, I've done some night flying. I haven't done a ton of night flying. I definitely keep current. I definitely make sure that I can take passengers at any time and it be legal. And I make sure that I feel good enough about it to where if I get caught out in a situation for whatever reason on a trip or whatever, that I feel like I can get back. And I think that, you don't have, just because you're able to do something doesn't mean that you have to always set out to do that. Now, there are other people that fly a lot at night, and maybe that makes me feel, a little uneasy. But we can talk about, and we'll get into after Ben, you address the next question here. But I want to talk about some things that we've done, maybe a little tips, tricks, or idiot hacks for midlife pilots. But Ben, what do we got here from Tipper Air?
Well, and that kind of leads to all of that. When I'm doing cross-country flights at night, it's really not a whole lot different for me than day VFR if I'm flying VFR. However, my route planning goes an extra step. And I'm going to route over as many airports as I possibly can. The only thing that really scares me is knowing where to put the plane down in the event of an emergency.
Yeah.
And so my route may go 30, 50 miles further as long as within gliding distance. And you can't do that always, and I understand that. But I want to be, if I'm flying in South Georgia, the majority of the land down there is fields. So there's a slightly greater comfort level. Now there's obstructions, and I'm not discounting any of that. But for the most part, I'm just going to watch my route very closely when I'm flying at night. Obviously, I'm going to make sure all my lights are working very well. I'm doing a thorough pre-flight. They're all, I pre-flight the airplane all the time, but I'm watching a few extra things. I'm checking the brakes, and then the other thing that I would mention to Tipper on this, as far as best practices, I like to go up more than every 90 days and do proficiency flights. I like to go out to non-towered airports, where you don't have the ambient lighting from the city, and so you get a better effect of the black hole effect, where it looks like you're landing into a black abyss. I like to practice that. It's just getting better at it, and for when the time comes that I do need it.
Kind of like how your soul feels when you're at the drive-through at like a Jack in the Box.
It's kind of how my soul felt when I was trying to pick up that TV, and I felt a pop. But I've told the story before, taking my dad up for the first time, and we're going to use the word again. So I don't know if there's a sound effect you want to add, but just flying him to Apalachicola. And the lights were not working. The runway lights weren't working, but mine were. And I mean, I bounced it 2 or 3 times. It was very similar to the St. Simon's landing that you guys witnessed. And my dad looked over at me and goes, "That was the best landing I've ever seen." Yeah. So
hey, real quick, I just want to touch on a few things. We got more comments coming in than we can keep up with, but I just want to rapid fire a couple of these things.
Please.
If that's all right. So where did it go? There was one from Chris C that I thought was poignant. Oh yeah, he basically says, where'd it go? He says, I understand the logic, Brian, and it makes perfect sense, but at sub 100 hours, it's just not a priority in my continued learning yet. So I wanted to bring this up to say, I'm not telling people what the best thing is to do for them. I don't know, man. You talk to your instructor, you have your own track, you have your own path. I think just in a generality, we always are going to speak from our own experiences and also kind of like what our goals are and where we are. And I knew even when I was sub 100 hours or right at about 100 hours, I knew that I wanted to be taking some really long trips and going as far as I could possibly go, or just to see what that would be, in staged increments. I was really starting to stretch out. I wanted to get out of the nest. And so the further you get out of the nest, I think the more you have to entertain the potentials of these kinds of things. So I'm not telling anybody what to do in that case, which, by the way, side note, Ben, I was just thinking today as I was sitting there at 7,500 feet on autopilot for, 3 hours, how incredibly easy it is to travel in an airplane with an autopilot. And when I was thinking about when we did the Outer Banks thing, I flew, 600 or 700 miles as a pretty darn new pilot with no auto. I was hand flying all of that,
man. Yeah.
2 ways, and doing those 6 hour doing 6 to 7 hours of flying per day.
Yeah.
Cross country, hand flying. It's one of those things where when you're young, you look back on your youth and you're like, how did I ever do that? Or why?
Why is the real question. Why would you ever do that? But
I just wanted to get out there, man. So that's what I did. Now I'm just sitting there with cruise control on, like eating a Cliff Bar or whatever, just kind of looking around like, oh my gosh, this is so easy. But anyway, night flying. Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. And another thing is, people are talking about headlamps, and obviously, yes, have, a gazillion batteries and 25 different options. And, as much redundancy as humanly possible, you definitely want. And your phone flashlight is probably the worst thing to turn on in the entire world. But, it's been done. People are talking about the red lenses, and you got to have a red lens, and some are saying green, and then greens. I am not a person that is a qualified source, but I've definitely heard different things about the red, different things about the green. We're not here to say we don't know, but we like it all. Red feels cool. It feels like it's kind of paramilitary. What do you got there, Ben?
You definitely need to be red. That's going to save your night vision.
That's what I've been told, that that's not the case though, by some people that are naysayers. So I don't know, man.
I'm just, again, I'm not an instructor. I'm not a CFI. I'm just telling you from my experience and my midlife eyes that they're not wrapped. They're actually the only thing that's holding up on my body right now is my eyes. But I think it was Tipperary that had a comment, make sure that, you let your eyes adjust to the dark 30 minutes before flight. This was $35 on Amazon. And Ted, if I can find the link that I bought it from, I'll send it. You can put it in the show notes. It was $35. It's both red and white LED. It's USB charged. I've charged it twice, and I probably got about 8 hours on it. I use it for other things. This is the greatest headlamp on the planet. And it's got like a little spotlight feature on it too. So when you're pre-flighting, you can do a white light, and it puts a focus light on while you're looking. So when you fly a 1968 Cessna with the original panel, none of the dash is going to light up except for the ADF. The That works.
Yeah.
And I think one of the backup VOR works. So,
So if it's lit up, you don't need it.
it's exactly
the
right.
logic.
That's exactly right.
Well, I think that it goes down the path of there are 1,000 pieces of advice for night flying and things that people prefer, and we could go down that wormhole for a very, very long time. But I think in general, if I wanted anybody to walk away from anything with this conversation, it's just take it very seriously. Think about what's going on. Look at the satellite imagery of your destination before you take off. Know what your outs are. Know what your go around options are. Or if you're an instrument pilot, know what the terrain is. Know everything that your window for getting anything out of grace from the universe starts to really shrink tremendously at night. I have, the last little tip or whatever I can kind of leave is I have in my local area where I do most of my night flying, if I do night flying, I have waypoint labels that I can toggle off and on in ForeFlight I've gone and measured and evaluated. I've looked around with satellite imagery and measured every possible field or place that I can possibly land, and I've labeled them with some sort of quick kind of quip about what it is, just field 1,250 or whatever it is. And any place that I can possibly put it down all around, I've gone through and done all that looking so that if I'm in that situation, I've got somewhere to go, hopefully within the range of where I am. And I know if I don't have a better option and I've got to go down into the void, I can at least aim for something.
Ted,
Yeah.
you've got some numbers for us about night flying, and keep in mind we're not excluding. We're not excluding Ted purposefully, but with the sport pilot, he just doesn't get really an opportunity to fly at night because he turns into a pumpkin when he's in his airplane and he's flying at night.
Exactly. So I wanted to drop some references and some numbers here. First, there was a note for I got to find it, for Aviation News Talk episode 314 about the black hole effect, and so we'll include a link of that to that in the doobly-doo. Also, there's an entire chapter in Killing Zone on night flight. That's chapter 11. So an episode shouldn't go by without us mentioning Killing Zone. And here you go. The stats that are in that say that about 12% of flights are at night, but about 17% of the fatalities are at night. And those were from 2010 statistics. The newer statistics on that are that 26% of the fatalities are at night. So it hasn't gotten better. The fatality rate for instrument flying at night or in instrument conditions at night is really high. It's like 67% versus 26% of crashes in VMC have fatalities at night. That's kind of a weird one to try to think about, but I thought that was interesting. So, Aviation News Talk is important there. The other thing about the black hole effect was there was a study, and I think it's mentioned in Killing Zone, but a study from Boeing where they told people that you would aim low because of the black hole effect, and people still did it in the tests. So even knowing about it, even acknowledging it, people were going in and still doing it. And I don't know what the outcome is for that. Maybe just know that you can't get it out of your brain completely, and even though you're aware of it. So,
are you talking about like the runway coming up at you type of effect?
Yeah. Those, just the big holes of unlit area. People tend to aim low, and so they'll get well below the glide slope and land. It was saying when that study they'd land, in the sim, they'd land a mile to 2 miles short of the runway, even after being told about it. So, Aerosafe asked, do you still wish you could fly at night? And, this goes back to Chris C's comment about being sub 100 hours. I didn't have any desire at that point. It was after about 200 hours that I suddenly thought, I can see the value of flying at night. So it's something I think about now, kind of wish I could. And we'll see with Mosaic how that changes.
All right. Awesome. And Ted, you're max headrooming again, just slightly.
All right.
But I think we heard everything that you said. And I just want to say too, we are not CFIs, but guess who is? A lot of people in our Discord, and maybe in this chat right now, we've got CFII Nathan Ballard. Go check out his channel and contact him. Pay him to teach you things. Also, CFII Erica Gilbert, Aerosafe. Go check out her channel. She's been killing it with these weather videos, and we've got people around. You always want to have people that are better and smarter than you around you, and that's what
that's a low bar for us, but we really got some top talent. I want to say I've been watching a lot of all of Erica's and Nathan's videos. Erica's killing it on the weather piece of it, and I also did want to give a shout out to Max Prescott at Aviation News Talk, because he is on my list, and there are a lot of topics of interest to me that I'll listen to for his. So I do want to give him a shout out as well.
Yeah, and can I wrap up one thing about the night conversation before we get into the wind down here? Outside of all the particulars of how you need to plan carefully, execute it carefully, be mindful of flying at night, all of those things that we've talked about, the one thing I just want to leave people with, whether you're flying at night or whether you're totally against it or whatever else, it is magical. If Ben, you alluded to this, and maybe I didn't as much, but everyone who has flown at night can say for sure that it is some of the most beautiful, rewarding, calm, peaceful, less radio chatter. It's just beautiful. And there's a quietness and a smoothness and a stillness to it. And the way that the world looks and your place in it, it's like somehow being proximate to, it's like you're having a strange, almost like an interstellar experience. It's not of this world. It's something I think everybody should experience. So I just wanted to leave at least a little dusting of kind of romance around this, because it is absolutely transcendent. It is such an incredible experience.
It's beautiful for sure, and it's really calm, and I really like that about it. Well, as we wrap up, I said that Tomato Flames was going to come back up again, and we have a rant. Actually, we held it from last week. So Mark Wendell Geek has graced us with a rant, and talking about Tomato Flames is what made me think of it. So I'm going to play that now.
Ben, Ted, Brian, I'd like another word. And today, that word is A, as in acronyms. It is almost impossible to imagine anyone having gone through flight training not being absolutely bombarded with acronyms. Aero, safety, NW craft, etc. Let's go through a few of my favorites. I am safe. Illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, emotion/eating. Pretty straightforward and clever. Are you safe to fly? Let's just check I am safe. Nice. PAVE, pilot, aircraft, environment, external pressures. Okay, so we're starting to lose the plot here. I'm good with pilot and aircraft, but V is the third letter in the word environment, and external pressure is 2 words. So really this one is PAEP. But if you do that, then you double the E's, and that's confusing. So maybe pilot, aircraft, environment pressure, PAEP. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue like PAVE does. I guess we can make an exception. AV18. Oh, wait, you're supposed to pronounce the 1 as an I, so aviate. What is this for again? Oh yeah, airworthiness of the airplane. Annual, VOR check, 100-hour check. Okay, hold on. Do I need a 100-hour check on my airplane? No. Oh, well, I guess if I'm renting an airplane, it needs it. Okay, so let's see. Where were we? A. Wait, we did A already for annual. What's the second A again? Oh, yeah, altimeter. The T is for transponder and the E is for ELT. Wait, we also need a pedostatic check, don't we? Oh, so the A equals altimeter pedostatic? You mean to tell me we created an acronym that doesn't include everything we have to remember? But now, let's talk about the Mac Daddy of worst aviation acronyms. This is the king of useless acronyms. Everyone say it with me. A tomato flames. First, it's way too long. It's got 13 letters. Second, over the half of those letters are repeats with 3 A's, 2 O's, and 2 T's. Third, one of the T's is temperature gauge, and one of the O's is oil temperature gauge. You don't think you're going to get stuck thinking you already said one of them? And most importantly, it's almost entirely pointless. It's supposed to help you remember all of the equipment for VFR day flight. Meaning, if something on this list is broken, you can't take off. Well, guess when you're going to check that? When you're on the ground and have access to look it up. This is an acronym for the Hermione Grangers of the world who just want to show off to their DPE, which stands for Designated Pilot Examiner. No one needs to memorize this. You want to know what's easier to remember? 91.205. That's the section in the CFR, which is Code of Federal Regulations, where you find day VFR requirements, VFR being Visual Flight Rules. We used to call CFRs FARs, as in Federal Aviation Regulations, but that's no longer acceptable. You can look up CFRs online in the eCFR, Electronic CFR, or in your mislabeled FAR AIM, the last part of which is Aeronautical Information Manual. In the length of this short rant, I've listed off 15 different acronyms. Aero, Safety, NW Craft, I Am Safe, PAVE, Aviate, VOR, ELT, A Tomato Flames, DPE, CFR, VFR, FAR, eCFR, and AIM. Which, if I were in the mold of the FAA, I could turn into this acronym. I canvassed Vape AF. And here's the thing. The ones I listed aren't even the tip of the iceberg. Go ahead, Google FAA acronyms. It'll take you to a site that will give you more than 300 acronyms. Just for the letter A. I stopped counting at A. I have no idea how many more there are because, frankly, I don't want to know. As I close out this rant, I just want to say one more thing. TEUC. The acronyms are out of control. Okay, thanks.
Oh, man.
I don't know.
Delivers.
I don't know what we're paying him, but it's not enough.
I love it. It's such a, I can't help but recognize that he is the embodiment of Andy Rooney at the end of 60 Minutes. This is the perfect way to wrap up our podcast. What an incredible thing. I want to go down the wormhole of acronyms, but I don't.
He so eloquently says what we all think, and I thank him profusely for it. What a really great job. As we wrap up tonight, just going to give a quick reminder, the Midlife Pilot Fly-In in Nashville, Tennessee, April 26th through the 28th. We've got some updates that'll be coming. We'll probably go into a lot more detail on our next episode, but there's been a few changes that we'll get into. Had a little bit of work to do this past week, but there'll be more to follow on that. Anything else, gentlemen, for the good of the order?
No, I just want to remind people that everything happens at midlifepilotpodcast.com, and that if you want to leave us feedback, we would love to have it. All the information about the fly-in event is there. All the things that you need are there. So we're trying to simplify and make it easy. So midlifepilotpodcast.com. And then the last piece of this, by the way, is it's a little hack. But if you go and you look in our carefully crafted show notes, you will see at the very end of those show notes a link that you can click where you can easily send us a voicemail directly without having to think about how to get it on an app and record it and find the file and send it. And we would love to I mean, nobody's going to meet the standard of One Dull Geek and his rants here, but you know, try to come in close second. See what you.
You know what? I'd love to see somebody challenge them. So, well, thanks guys for potting with us tonight. Thanks to the folks in the chat. You guys are awesome. We appreciate it for hanging around. Closing out episode 26. I mean 26. How about 60s? What are we at now?
66.
Next week, I think we're going to talk a little bit about ratings race versus taking your time as a new pilot, which I look forward to that discussion. So, signing off episode 66 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. Good night, everybody.